Hello there, I'm Kios Ronin Beatmaker, and welcome to Lounge Ronin. All things, everything. If you're new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And on this episode, we're going to discuss Goddess Ninkharsag, the powerful mother who faded into the Holy Ghost. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, like with all things, everything, if this information intrigues you, please make sure to do your own deep dive, as you might be surprised as what you discover about yourself and the world, as this will be a light introduction. This article was written by Katrina Sisowath, updated May 13th, 2021. The tale of our creation. Hold on, excuse me. Goddess Ninkharsag, ancient powerful mother who faded into the Holy Ghost. The tale of our creation we know from the Bible is only half the story, one which has been heavily edited. But have you ever wondered how God created male and female in his image? There are other sources that give alternate accounts, filling in missing details or answering questions raised by reading Genesis. The Jews wrote that their religious text while in captivity in Babylon, using the Sumerian and Assyrian tales of gods and goddesses as a basis, and then amending them to fit their own mythology and religion. It is in the Sumerian Babylonian tales we find a different perspective on a well known story. The Anunnaki, a different version of a well known story. In ancient myth, Enki and Enlil were known as two half brothers fighting for control over Earth, with their father Anu undecided as to who should succeed him. Their half sister was Sud, and she was held in the highest esteem by the Anunnaki, and her own base of power on a sacred mountain, Eridu. It is said the tradition among the Anunnaki was to secure the bloodlines through mating half siblings, never fully blooded siblings. So even if a male produced an heir with his concubine or wife, if he then had a son with his half sister, that child would be their heir presumptively. A little Valerian for you there. There was the base of the disagreement between Enki and Enlil, which we see replicated in the story of Abraham and his sons. Abraham had a child with Hagar, and their son Ishmael was the eldest and should have met their heir. But his wife Sarah was, according to some accounts, Abraham's half sister, and so their son Isaac had precedence. Interesting. We see this kind of going on as well with the royal families, especially in Europe. Very prevalent. Where do you think a lot of these ideas that these royal families and oligarchs got their inspiration for how they would live as upper echelon individuals? Many of these ideas are just being reused by the same old families that evolved over time, whether it's through various cataclysms or resets or coups d'etats. But I have covered the story of Enki and Enlil a little bit, and there is some cause to speculate that this story spans the entire world. This warring faction of brothers and sisters over this earthly realm. Check out my playlist. Let's continue. Whether it was to keep the family together and bring peace to the warring brothers, or because she had plans for her own descendants, Sud mated with both Enki and Enlil, producing their heirs. The result was such that the next generation found themselves continuing the dispute, and quite often Sud had to be called in to settle wars. As a result of her peace efforts and acknowledgement in her accomplishments as a scientist, including the creation of humans, she was given the honorific Lady of Life, or Mamu Mama, and became known from then on as Ninkharsag. She is the mother goddess that we know in many forms, though not Mother Earth, which is the Tiamat or Gaia, the creator of life, whose milk nourishes kings. Now, what's interesting to note is the idea here of the Lady of Life. Now, we covered another goddess of fertility and life, the goddess Nimka of Mesopotamia, I believe. And you could almost say a similar idea here in terms of using previous religious ideas to create new foundations of a belief system, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Islam. The further back you look, the more prevalent the inspirations become. Let's continue. Here we have an image of an Akkadian cylinder seal impression depicting a vegetation goddess, possibly Ninkharsag, sitting on a throne surrounded by worshippers. Now, I believe I may have covered her as well, but I'm not sure. But feel free to check out the Lounge Ronin playlist. Let's continue. Ninkharsag and the creation of humanity. As far as we know, legend indicates her motives in creating humans were unselfish. The Anunnaki wanted servants to do the material tasks for them on Earth, and so it fell to Ninkharsag and Enki to create these beings. After some time, Enki was not satisfied with their creation, who ate out of troughs like sheep, and wanted to give them more intelligence. Ninkharsag agreed, and their experiments were eventually successful, though Enlil was outraged at what they had done, accusing them of making men like gods. While Ninkharsag's motives were said to have been for the best, seeking to better the lives of their servants and give them intelligence with the hope that they may have fulfilling lives, Enki was a little more complicated. He needed soldiers, and in the text, he and one of his sons outfitted and trained humans to wage war, which implies this is a fundamental reason for mankind's willingness to war on behalf of God. It was supposedly ingrained into our ancestors at the moment of their awakening. It is apparent that though Enki may have bred soldiers, he was preferable as Earth's ruler from humanity's point of view than his harsh and tyrannical brother. And this is really interesting here, as this story is seen even in Inca mythology. These two brothers are seen throughout many versions of and different iterations of civilizations throughout the world. And often not, Enlil is seen carrying what looks like a handbag. Some people speculate that it is a bag that is holding all of the knowledge of intelligence, and meaning that it has the bag. This bag carries the concepts for crop growing, the concepts for art, music, philosophy. And as we see here with Ninkharsag, a along with Enlil, they wanted humanity to be more than just servants, more than just slaves. But Enki used war as a way of worship. And you see this prevalent throughout humanity. It's like you gain knowledge and spirit and soul at the expense of war. It's a very interesting situation we find ourselves in as humans. Let's continue. As a result of the back and forth between the two brothers, Ninkharsag found herself siding with Enki more and more, despising Enlil's treatment of the humans whom she loved. Every time they suffered, either as a result of war or natural disaster, she would weep as though for her own children. Now, when she mentions natural disasters, those are those cataclysms that Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson will speak about, as well as ancient texts. Something to just keep in mind when you do your own studies. Let's continue. The goddess loses her position. So how did she lose her position? The mythological record states the war of arms became a war of ideology, as mankind continued to grow in spite of Enlil's efforts at population control. As man diversified, most found themselves in two camps. Enki, whose dominion was Magan or Egypt, and Enlil, who had moved his power base from Sumer to what we know today as Jerusalem. All three were old by that time, and Ninkharsag was mockingly being referred to as an old cow, behind her back by the other Anunnaki, though she still had power. Enlil, however, felt himself betrayed by his brother Enki, not accepting his claim to the throne, and by Ninkharsag taking his side. Also, he felt deceived by their creation of intelligent humans starting with Eve, and by Inanna, often mistaken for Ninkharsag, but different female, who ransacked his holy of holies in her quest to dominate the earth. We did cover Inanna, so feel free to check that out. Here we have Inanna, the most prominent female deity in ancient Mesopotamia, and Ishtar. She was a pretty vindictive woman. We get the same sense that Enlil becomes embittered by these setbacks, and that his anger passes to his sons and grandsons, and the idea spread even to some of Enki's sons. It was this, through an amalgamation of different Sumerian gods, that the figure of Yahweh is said to have come into being. One whose followers proclaimed he wanted supremacy over all, declaring that man should have no other gods but him, and declaring the others to be demons. Are they saying that followers of Christ are worshiping a false god? Now, if you've seen my video on the truth behind the Christ myth, or watched my video on Martin Luther King and the Egyptian connection, you'll understand why me saying that is no surprise, and why we find ourselves in an inverted world with an inverted belief system. Let's continue. Though ancient texts say Enki was fugitively cast out of the pantheon as a serpent, and Eve and Lilith demonized for their demonstration of will, it was still difficult for the priesthood to supplement Ninkharsag, who had become the Middle Eastern Astarte, the partner of Il. In many places in the Old Testament, there were prophets begging the people to forget Ashahara and threatening God's wrath and punishment for disobedience. yet worship of the mother was ingrained in them. And you see how wild it would be for the Christian monolith that it is today to realize that the creation of mankind was by a woman. Now, we already covered this with Isis being the Christian version of Mother Mary. You see, these ideas are things that the Christians and practitioners of Judaism and of Islam, many others, would not want you to know. It would get you in trouble. It would get you chastised, ostracized, outcast, exiled, whatever it may be. Not exonerated, but I mean, technically you would be. You'd be knowing the truth and speaking the truth. It's no disrespect to these newer religions, but they've done a disservice to the world by destroying their origins. Let's continue. For example, the book of Jashar, the book of Jasher, who is the personal staff bearer to Moses, which tells of the story of Exodus, but from a different perspective, says that it was not Moses, but Miriam, who was the spiritual leader of the tribes. At that point, the Jews did not worship Jehovah, but Asherah, who was symbolized as the golden cow. It was a struggle for Moses to wean his people away from the worship of Asherah, and he had to resort to imprisoning Miriam. Yet it still took hundreds of years, during which time Yahweh and Asherah were worshipped together, before the priests were able to stop the worship of the goddess. It was not until their captivity in Babylon that the followers of Yahweh, who despised the influence of Asherah, took advantage of the vast libraries and texts to create their own religious texts, rewriting their history in the process. God becoming a single being, creating man and woman in his image. What happened to Ninkharsag, Asherah? She could not be completely erased, so they rendered her to ethereal, inconsequential. She was acknowledged as holy, yet held no personality, no voice, no force or will or identity. In the end, she became literally a ghost. And there you have it, a light introduction into the goddess Ninkharsag and the various origins of Christianity. You know, the Pope likes to pride himself of being a progressive, but I assure you, the Pope will not be this progressive. But here you have it. Another case to be made, another source to be studied. And I implore you to do your own research. For as it is here below, well, I can't, for some odd reason, it's not opening. But below, we have the references. The references are there for you to look at. When I leave the link up, you'll be able to take a look at the references yourself. But this is something that okay, yeah, the references are there. Let me double check real quick to make sure. Just to make sure. I want confirmation for you guys. All right, well, we can't click on the link for them. But when I go on to the link online, the sources are there. Uh, so I know a lot of people have been a little critical of me using this website, but like I always say, the sources are in below. I'm looking at them right now. I can click on them right now if I wanted to. But I just, like I've always implored, please do your own research onto these things, or check out my earlier videos to give you a bit of a um a starting base for you, a baseline. Because this is the thing, they don't want you to acknowledge or learn about the origins of your religious belief system. And most of the reason is because of the domestication system that has been created within these new modern day religions, whether it be Christianity, Islam, Judaism. These modern day religions, they were designed through control. I like I've said, check out my video on Martin Luther King and the Egyptian connection. We go over Martin Luther King Jr.'s essay on the mystery schools and their influence on Christianity. Christianity was created by through older mystery schools and occult schools, mainly the Egyptian pantheon. And here, you're getting an idea of another aspect. This is Sumerian religion, but needless to say, this is another aspect of how God was really at one point a man and a woman, and that the creator of God, what the creator of humankind, was a man and a woman, mostly a woman. But when we changed from a matriarchy society into a patriarchal society. Now I know some people will hear my words and think I'm speaking, feminism or something like that, and that's not the case. We're speaking in terms of uh, religion and humanity's way of life. Now I do not know exactly how it was during the time when we were worshiping a matriarchal goddess, but it seems to me that things were pretty well in terms of life and being. And they like to downplay the technological advancements of those time periods and those different civilizations, but if they were worshiping a female matriarchal goddess with a pantheon of male and female goddesses, I mean, we have to then start reassessing our own belief system and what it means to be human. Now, I know some of these concepts are challenging and will irk some people, but you know, are you willing to challenge your foundational belief system? Are you willing to evolve and grow? And sometimes that takes learning the truth of what we believe, of what it means to have faith, whether it's the Torah, the Talmud, the Bible. These are fundamental questions that we are not allowed to ask. We're not allowed to challenge the non canonical books. We're not allowed to challenge these ideas. We're not allowed to challenge the truth of Moses. We're not allowed to challenge any of this stuff. Because to challenge is to think as an individual, is to think beyond the confines of the bubble, is to break free from the chains of domestication. This is the world we find ourselves in right now. Religiously, the world is shifting more right. As this era of agnostic atheism, communism, and socialism begins to wilt, and die, what type of religious belief systems will permeate? How aggressive will their tactics be? What eraser of history and origins will be brought forth? That's why it's imperative that you maintain your humanity and balance and buy books. Plenty of books on the origins of our world. We need to maintain the truth, regardless of the criticisms and threats that we may face. It didn't stop Graham Hancock, didn't stop Randall Carlson. It can't stop us from seeking the answers to the questions that prevent us from being able to fully believe in our faith and or our gods and God. You are more than what the books say. You are more than what your preacher may offer to you in guidance and advice. Do not deny yourself the capabilities and the possibilities and the chance to go beyond what your faith denies you to see, to touch, and to believe. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lounge Ronin. All things, everything. If you made it this far, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And until next time, stay positive, stay focused, stay true, and much love.